Do not change the station. What you're hearing is coming from the Big Sci-Fi Podcast and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. Stay tuned for the next exciting episode of... Wait a minute. Receiving a new transmission. What is that? What am I seeing? It's big. It's really big. Oh my God, it's so... Welcome to Season 6 of the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, the biggest sci-fi podcast in the galaxy. Join our crew, Adina, Brian, Chris, and Steve, as we travel the Milky Way looking for the best that science fiction has to offer. Make sure you're strapped in tight, because we're going to have a lot of fun talking all things sci-fi. Stay tuned to this channel for the next audio transmission. We often interview actors, directors, authors, behind-the-scenes artists and designers, even an astronaut. But this week, we are interviewing a different type of professional. We're pleased to have with us for this episode, Amy Imhoff, who is a creative and successful marketing professional with over 17 years of progressive experience in digital media, partnerships, and event management. She's highly proficient in business strategy and brand identity and skilled in bringing change makers together. She is incredibly passionate about effective communication and uplifting diverse voices in STEAM. She's a feature writer, speaker, and host for science fiction media, feminist pop culture, and STEAM spaces. She also creates global aerospace industry connections through the legacy of Star Trek's vision of an inclusive future, working closely with Starfleet officers, industry creatives, and change makers. She also is organizing for the Space Force. What? That's amazing. It's my privilege to welcome to the show the one and only Amy Imhoff. How you doing, Amy?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me on. I so appreciate it.
It is.
I want everyone to know. I was just to say, I want everyone to know that Amy was smiling broadly during that whole presentation.
As she should.
I love hearing someone reading back my description of myself that you've written in the third person.
I tried to do it in my best radio voice too, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Thank you. We're also here with my amazing co-host, Adina Mignona. How you doing, Adina?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing fine, but I'm not in Maryland like normal. I'm in Seattle, Washington today.
Wow.
On a little vacation.
You're closer to Steve than you've ever been while recording our podcast.
This is very true. This is very true. And I'm just going to say this morning, my activity was we went to the Museum of Pop Culture and they had a whole science fiction section and they included only a little bit of Star Trek. I mean, lots of different science fiction prop and memorabilia. But from Star Trek, they had a uniform of Captain Picard, one of Patrick Stewart's uniforms, and some of his Borg facial stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then a whole bunch of other like stuff from the Terminator, from Blade Runner, from Battlestar Galactica. A whole wide range of science fiction.
This is the 20th anniversary of Battlestar Galactica. I think it was actually in December technically, but this whole
20
year is celebrating. Yeah. Yes, I can't believe it. I love that show.
Well, the funny thing is my son is here with me, my older one. He's like, what's that? I'm like, oh, we have the DVDs at home. I think it's time. I think you're old enough to watch this now. So a BSG rewatch might be in my future.
Wow. That would be amazing. And
you got to start him young.
Yeah, sure. And also we have retired nice guy, but he's no red shirt, Steve Markin with us from Los Angeles.
Today I'm wearing a blue shirt, so it's okay.
Which
I won't
is
get hurt.
Appropriate, the science color, right? So this is with our friend Amy here. So I'm Brian Donahue. I'll be your discussion leader for this episode. And let's get to know Amy better, okay? Learn more about her work, shall we? Amy, why don't you start by just giving us a general picture of your life, kind of where you came from, what led to your getting into STEAM and all the work that you're involved in now. We'll just kind of go from there and we might ask some questions, but we want to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I grew up in the Lehigh Valley and I went to Fairfield University here in Connecticut, which is where I am beaming at you from. I met my husband and I stayed up here, and my brother also moved up here, so that's great that I'm near him. I got my master's in English literature a couple years after I graduated Fairfield, and I was working in tech writing for the first part of my career for about almost 11 years. I was doing that. and it was not always super exciting. And I would watch the NASA live stream from my cubicle where I was very bored and think about all the things that I wanted to do in my career, because just editing other people's financial and technical jargon was not doing it for me. So, especially having my master's in literature, I was like, should I teach college? Which I did do for a little while. And very much enjoyed, although adjuncts are not compensated and or treated that great.
Right.
So yeah, I got let go from one of the tech writing company that I worked for in 2017, and it actually turned out to be the best thing for me. It was the catalyst that allowed me to start my own business. So I call it Amy Imhoff Digital Management. I do digital content, event management, and general marketing. So I've been doing that since 2018. And my first big client was Kate Mulgrew, who I think you might know.
Yeah,
nice lady. Nice lady.
Not personally. We have not had the pleasure of meeting her personally, not yet, but we know of her.
Well, she's going to be up in Boston this weekend. I'm going to head up there and see her and bring some books. I helped her with her book. She brought me on board to help with her second book release. And and unbeknownst to the general population, that she was going to be coming back for Prodigy as Hologram Janeway, which has been a very weird and awesome and interesting ride for the Prodigy team. So I think they have created a wonderful show. I think it's excellent Star Trek. Obviously, having the star power of Kate behind it was amazing. But I've definitely done a little bit of work with intersecting with politics and social justice and philanthropy. Kate has been an Alzheimer's advocate for a while, and I am now working with a number of different nonprofits when it comes to space and STEAM and research. So everything is kind of tied up in the global space economy, which I've been learning a lot about these last 3.5, almost 4 years now. So
wow,
I love working with space, and I hope to continue to do it for a long time.
Yeah. So can I ask you? I'm going to go back a little ways because I'm interested in this. You said you taught literature, right, for a brief while.
I did.
What's your specialty? Like, what do you love about that? What did you teach, or
So I was just having my master's and not my PhD. I was teaching intro to writing classes for freshmen. And I was at the College of New Rochelle, which no longer exists. They had an embezzlement scandal.
Oh my goodness!
So they are no longer a school that exists. But one of my good friends from college was the chair of the English and writing department. And he said, we really need adjuncts this semester. I know that you've been looking for a gig. And I said, I would love to teach. I think that's something I've always wanted to explore and have that opportunity. So I taught college writing. I had a couple sections of freshmen. I had a lot of, so the College of New Rochelle has a good nursing program. So I had a lot of students that were in nursing. So it wasn't like writing was not their first, was not their passion, but you need it to get through college. And I had some of the basketball team on one class and some of the baseball team in the other class. So those boys were so chatty, way more so than the girls. It was hilarious. I had to separate, these are all like 17, 18 freshmen.
Right.
They're very young. And it was their first time kind of away from home and, learning about the responsibilities of having to, no one's going to be there to tell you to do your homework. My personal specialty in literature is British Romantic poetry.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
My thesis is on feminist agency in British Romantic poetry and the Victorian backlash. So many literary periods are often result in response to the one immediately prior. It's like anything in history is a reaction. Romanticism was a reaction to the Industrial Revolution and all of the industry and pollution and all the things that kind of arose in England at that time. And then the poets that were advocating that we go back to nature and love and flowers and all that stuff. So there's John Keats is like one of the primary poets that it's Byron, Keats, and Shelley are kind of the big three of that era, but there are a lot more, like Christina Rossetti, who I definitely wrote about in my thesis as one of the few women that were kind of in that club at the time. So yeah, I love all that. And I also really love almost this very there's overlap in the years of the corresponding era in the United States, which is like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau and Emily Dickinson. They were a little bit later, but essentially the same, like same kind of vibe. You know, transcendentalists being Emerson in the woods in Massachusetts saying, I'm a transparent eyeball. So, you know, stuff like that, where he's just, they're like soaking in the like beauty of New England and living in New England. And I've been to their houses. I've gotten to see like, you know, where Emerson lived and walk around Walden Pond and visit Emily Dickinson's home in Amherst. And this area has a lot of rich literary history because this is where people settled first in the United States.
Well, I'd just like to say real quick, and I know guys, of course, feel free to ask questions. I feel like I'm hogging Amy for a minute here, but
no, go ahead.
I had two professors my freshman year. One was an intro to writing, and then another was like a process of research. And I could not figure out what to write about. And she said, well, what do you love? And I said, well, I love Star Trek. She said, oh my gosh, Star Trek has done so much in our culture, in our society, on all sorts of different issues. Pick an issue and write about how Star Trek has teach us how Star Trek has. So I chose racism because that was the first thing as an 18-year-old boy, you know,
black on one side and white on the other.
Right. Yeah. Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. You know, I mean, there's all sorts, the great Deep Space Nine episode where Cisco goes back. Yeah. You know, had just come out recently, I think, actually. And anyway, so those two gals influenced me so much and gave me so much encouragement as a young man in my writing, because it was very raw, but they saw a spark there and they encouraged me in ways no one else has. So I have very warm places in my heart for those two women who taught me as a freshman who knew absolutely nothing about the world. Some positive things.
Yeah, I have had some wonderful teachers. My high school English teacher is kind of a legend. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and Ms. McBrin was my English teacher for 3 of the 4 years. And I was very small. My graduating class was only 65 girls. So we got a lot of individual attention, and she was the one who introduced me to British Romantic poetry and all sorts of literary concepts. I mean, she would make us memorize soliloquies. I still remember the Macbeth soliloquy, and there was we had roles in the play about Medea, and you know, we would play these like ancient Roman. She had so many like Greek and Roman mythology, and also she was just an inspiration and continues to be. Her passion and her drive and the way she was able to get up. I mean, honestly, being an adult now and seeing like she got up there every day and had that kind of enthusiasm and like fire in her to teach literature. And I hope that I was able to bring a little bit of that to the students that I taught, because I do have a great deal of passion for literature and learning and you know, making sure that as a society we are educated and we have seen what has happened in our past, so we don't repeat that in the future. But we're not so good at that, are we?
No, not at all.
But one of the first panels I did at Star Trek Las Vegas was a Star Trek and literature panel.
Really?
So yeah, that was awesome. And that was too broad of a topic actually for an hour. And then the next year or the year after, myself and my friend Brooke did Shakespeare and Star Trek, and we were on the main stage, and we approached Bob Picardo and Robbie McNeil and asked them to come up and do a little back and forth there from Hamlet, I think.
Wow.
And it was really awesome.
Wow.
So they of course were super excited to read Shakespeare at a Star Trek convention. So
right.
And so many of the Trek actors are, you know, grounded in Shakespeare and theater. Watching any of them do it is amazing. On the recent Star Trek cruise, one of the entertainment evenings was kind of like a mishmash of different things, and Armin Shimmerman and David Ajala did a little scene from Hamlet together.
Yay.
And that was and I'm not really, I don't claim to be a great Shakespeare, you know, like person. Like I know enough, but I'm not like, but that was just amazing to see. They're so wonderful when they get into that.
Armin is brilliant. He's so well versed, and you know, he teaches Shakespeare at the college level. I actually, before I even went to a convention, I had already seen Kate Mulgrew and Avery Brooks do Shakespeare
Oh my
when I was in
goodness.
Wow.
college. So when I was in college, the Yale Rep Theater, I live very close to New Haven, and we went up there and we saw Avery in King Lear.
Oh my.
Wow.
And I remember
Wow.
because we got the special student prices, and I was not in the honors program, but I heard that they were going because one of my friends said, Amy, there's some Star Trek guy in this play that they're advertising for honors kids. And I was like, which one?
Star Trek,
And they said, and I
some
was
Star
like,
Trek
"What?"
guy.
So I messaged the professor that was in charge of the honors program and who was going on the trip. And I said, I know I'm not, I had opted out of honors in college because I did that all through high school. And I was like very tired from my very high academic achieving in high school. And I wanted to kind of I wanted to give myself more of a break in college. And I said to her, hey, I'm a huge Trekkie. I have to go see Captain Sisko in Shakespeare. And she was like, come on, let's go. I'm a huge Trekkie too. I was like, okay, great. So, and I remember the woman who was sitting in front of us had a Bajoran earring on. And I was like, I love your earring.
So what was your introduction to Trek? Anybody that's been around conventions may know you, recognize you. But what was your introduction to Star Trek in particular?
I love talking about this. So I was 7. Good. I was 7 years old. And I came in probably on one of the best episodes of Next Generation ever, which is yesterday's Enterprise.
Yes, indeed.
And I was just on a different podcast, and I talked about how that episode is actually very female driven. And seeing a female captain and Tasha Yar and Whoopi Goldberg, that was I already knew Whoopi Goldberg as a kid from like Sister Act and a bunch of the other like kid oriented movies that she had done during the 90s. And so if I was 7, it would have been 1990-ish.
Sounds about right for that episode.
Yeah. And
a little earlier.
I remember saying to my dad was like, my parents were like, oh, if Whoopi Goldberg's in it, she can watch it. Like, it's fine. And my dad was like, oh, it's Star Trek, it's fine. And afterward, I remember being like confused because you're 7. I didn't understand where Tasha had disappeared to.
Right.
I was like, is the blonde lady dead? And my dad was like, I think she probably is dead. And I was like, oh no.
He was already
I went back. I became super, super into it. I would watch the reruns. I would tape them. I had a ton of VHS tapes.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
I did catch up and realize that Tasha was
already dead
in early on, unfortunately.
Right.
So
Denise
did
is lovely.
you?
I'm glad they brought her back.
Oh yeah. Did you take out the commercials too? Did you sit there during the episodes and pause and stop it?
No, they all had they all had the commercials in it. Yeah, I remember seeing like you could save space on the tape if you did that. But that's funny. I'm glad that all of you remember and understand the suffering of taping things off the TV. Because if you missed it, you were screwed until it came back in a rerun. You could not just download it.
Or did one of your friends tape? Did a friend tape it, and would they lend you the tape and all this? But one of the funny things about the commercials.
That's actually very important to my fandom because I watched Star Trek mostly in a silo by myself until I was in college. None of my friends, I had one, my I say cousin, we're not technically related, but my cousin Steve, he watched, but we did not live that close to each other. So we, when we got together, we'd talk about Captain Picard. And so I did not really discover fandom until the X-Files and message boards in high school.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So message boards in the X-Files. And yes, there was definitely some Star Trek message boards that I looked for, but they were not really like, there were chat rooms and I wasn't as into it. I just wanted to talk about how cool Captain Janeway was.
Right.
And I'm sure my parents obviously didn't want me going into chat rooms and
yeah. Well, my
which is funny now.
So it's an everyday thing now. I mean, my mother knew that I was truly in love with my future wife at the time when I was not home on Saturday nights recording Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the final season. She knew that I was in love and said, you must love that woman because you're not here on Saturday night recording these things. So
That's great. I love that. That's the
Yeah.
barometer.
right.
Yeah.
There were other things too, of course,
Yes,
but
that is my intro. And then I did not watch Deep Space Nine, much of it while it aired. I watched that in college and like right after. But I watched Voyager religiously, like every week. So
So I'm going to ask you, Amy, besides Trek, I know we're talking Trek.
oh,
But
honey,
you also,
you see all
but
my
you,
nerd stuff
I
behind
know,
me?
I do see it. But
I'm
you also,
excited that this is the big
Yeah.
sci-fi podcast and I can talk about all sorts of other things.
and that's what I want to ask you. You do mention, you have an interest in Star Wars, of course, which is great. The other four-letter word, not as much, okay. But I saw about Princess Leia. There was that image of her on your site.
Oh, I wrote for a blog called Legion of Leia.
Right, that's what I saw. I was
Yeah,
wondering
that
about.
was
And then, of
very
course,
cool.
and then you also mentioned the X-Files. Did you enjoy watching that? Yes,
Yes,
I had two daughters that were religiously watching the X-Files, and we
Oh,
watched it all the way through. Season 7 is the best, I think, of all the seasons of X-Files.
I like 5 and 6, but I like 7 very much.
7 has a lot of humor in it. It
Yes.
has, and my personally my favorite episode, which is the Unnatural, the
I
baseball
love the
episode.
Unnatural. Oh,
And that's
yeah,
just
you are
so
legit.
great.
We can have a conversation here.
My favorite line is when they ask the alien why he likes baseball, and he says, "My race doesn't smile. Baseball makes me smile."
Aw.
And I thought that was great.
Jesse, oh, the actor who did it, really.
Yeah, I can't remember who was
It
it,
was on
but
Law
yes,
and
it was
Order,
really
I
good.
think. But
And besides the X-Files and Star Trek, what is there other interests you have in science fiction?
oh
Any
yes,
other?
I love pretty much all science fiction television. I would say my top 5 shows of all time are Star Trek, The X-Files, Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined, the
Okay.
new one.
No, not the one with Lauren Green. Okay.
It's okay. No, I absolutely love Ron Moore. He is like the god of sci-fi. Lost is up there, and then the fifth one favorite does not fit the rubric because it's Gilmore Girls.
Now,
But
that was
that
the
was a
other thing
great
I was going
show,
to ask you. We are currently rewatching all of Gilmore Girls on Netflix.
I love it.
Yeah, it is. It is
You and your
one of
wife
our.
are, Steve?
Absolutely, yes. It's
It's a
like
great show.
before we go to bed. It's like we need to have something that makes us smile, so we watch Gilmore Girls, and that was
Oh
really.
yeah, that's my comfort watch. If I'm in a bad mood, I'm watching Gilmore Girls. Or recently, Ted Lasso, which is I think I'm on my 4th rewatch of that show.
Oh my!
But,
Wow.
But I also super duper love For All Mankind, which I am
Yes.
basically evangelizing to every single nerd that I come across these days.
I just recently got Apple TV, and so I'm now I finished season 1. Now I'm starting season 2.
Wonderful.
It is remarkable. The special effects on that, the story, the rewriting of our history in NASA, and giving it a different twist. What if it's really creative where they've gone with this. And there's 4 seasons, total of 40 episodes. So I'm just at the beginning of it all.
You have such a journey. I mean, did you start season 2 yet?
I just got in season 2 with the sun flare.
Yes.
And what's going to happen with them on the moon. And that's just.
Oh, no, I know.
It's just to think of it is that where they have progressed, the way the story's progressed, and how far they've invested on the moon compared to our reality of what we did by the 1980s and how far we had moved along with space exploration.
What we didn't do.
I love the concept of the space race never ended, and I also think that it is secretly. I mean, that's the pitch: is the space race never ended. It's very quick and easy to say, but it's also, what if women were involved in NASA from the beginning?
And that's really very good storyline in it, and I think that's great. And they put them into positions of power, or authority, or getting things done. The only thing about season 1 that I was left wondering about was he literally almost killed a Russian. and
You're
that
like a
didn't
sweet
cause
summer
an
child over there.
escalation.
We're just gonna let
It's
you keep
like
watching.
I go like, like, okay, thank you. All right, I'm just wondering where that goes, where that went with, because that to me I was like, oh my goodness, he just killed a Russian in his airlock, which of course he doesn't, but still, it's like international incident time, kids. You know?
Oh yeah, oh honey, just wait.
Everybody,
all right, thank you.
and everyone should be watching this show. It is worth getting Apple TV for. But then once you get Apple TV and you find this show, you also need to watch Foundation.
Foundation. That's what I was going to say. Foundation. So
and Silo. I'm a huge
my husband
fan of
watched
Silo.
I don't know if I think Silo might be a little stressful. I don't know. I just didn't want to watch anything about a pandemic. I don't think.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it is. It's a little bit more. It's a little bit more dystopian. Well, a little bit. It's a lot dystopian. But the books. It's based on Wool by Hugh Howey, and the books are great. The book, and so I had read the books years ago, and I've just followed Hugh Howey just as he started off also as an indie author, and just to see his journey, and then to get this on the screen is just visualizing it is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of The Expanse.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on? Oh, we're just talking. That's not Apple TV. We're just talking.
That was on Sci-Fi, and then seeing as Jeff Bezos has all the money on the world and he loves sci-fi, he picked it up for Amazon Prime, and they were able to finish that show. And I'm trying to think other Orphan Black. I'm a big fan of Orphan Black. That's I think a show that not a lot of people have seen at this point.
I haven't seen it.
It's about women who are clones. And there are like 4 primary clones when it starts, but then it expands and there's more. And it's Tatiana Maslany won an Emmy for her math. I have never seen an actress so gifted in my whole life as Tatiana Maslany.
Interesting.
You can tell when one clone is pretending to be another clone. And I have no idea how she does that. Like, how do you do that as an actress? It's crazy.
Wow.
And it's extremely feminist and very driven by ethics and questions around human reproduction and the experiments that they do. Each of the clones has a very different upbringing and a very different perspective in life, and some of them are actually helping behind the scenes, and you're like, oh my god, you meet another one. So they figure out how many. So and there's a lot of ties to mythology. They call it Project Leda, like Leda and the Swan. It's a very cool episode. Max Frewer plays one of the main scientists, and I think he's done a great job. He's been in all sorts of sci-fi. I also love Fringe.
Oh, before you get off Orphan Black, that concept of one actor playing like multiple copies of the same, that always impressed me about Brent Spiner and how he was able to play himself and Lore and Dr. Soon. Like that episode Brothers, where he's all 3 in one scene and he's credibly 3 other individuals. So just based on the description, and now I've heard people have recommended Orphan Black in the past, but I've never gotten around to it. But just based on that now you got me. You
must.
It's on the near.
I mean, I think your listeners should all watch Orphan Black as well. It's like I think it's like kind of a sleeper gem. Like it was made for BBC in Canada.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I thought. You
will recognize, if you watch Strange New Worlds, you will recognize some of the same sets. Hannibal was also filmed literally in some of the same sets. The house at the end of the finale of Hannibal, that house features prominently in Orphan Black. They go there a few times. It's like an all glass kind of very fancy house on a cliff in Toronto. I'm sure the person who owns it has been compensated well for the use of their fancy house.
We're sorry Chris is not here. He's our resident Toronto.
Yes. So I have not been to Toronto yet. I was recently just across the water in Buffalo for the eclipse, where I saw nothing. And if you can hear a motorcycle, I'm sorry, there's a loudness outside my house.
So it was overcast on the eclipse.
Yes. Oh, I drove forever. It felt like 7 hours up to Buffalo.
My God.
To be in the path of totality, and it was just complete cloud cover during the eclipse. Bummer. And then like 2 hours later, blue sky. Right. I was like so angry. It did get completely dark. It was very cool to be in totality and to hear the way the animals were reacting, because my friends that I stayed with have like chickens and a dog, and they live out kind of in the middle of nowhere. So that was cool. But I was honestly I know people in various places did not have success either with the eclipse and the clouds. But like, I think Indianapolis had a good view, and then people in the very tippy top of New Hampshire, they had a good view, but we did not in Baltimore and Buffalo.
Adina came to Northeast Ohio, and we were in the path of totality, and we had just a brilliantly clear view of it.
And should have come there.
Yeah. Hey, next time, if we're all around in 99 years or whatever, well,
I do like the idea of chasing an eclipse and traveling to see one.
Yeah.
That's very cool. But yeah, I think all that obsession with that kind of phenomenon comes from shows that we were talking about, and like and I mentioned Fringe Science, which is what the show is kind of based on, but also like Joshua Jackson was in it, and I really enjoy him. I watched for the plot, and also Joshua Jackson with no shirt. but I love the gentleman who plays Walter. Help me, Denethor. What's his name?
Denethor from
Noble.
Lord
John
of the
Noble.
Rings.
He's the voice. Yeah, he's the voice of the bad guy on Prodigy.
Yes, I can't remember.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I'm looking it up right now because I can't remember either.
Noble. Yeah, it's John Noble.
John Noble.
Yes, and of course, I of course knew him from Lord of the Rings first.
Yeah.
And then when I saw him at the Diviner, the Diviner, that's his name on Prodigy. When I saw him in Fringe, he plays such a different character than Denethor, and he's very like lovable and funny, but also like a very serious, scientist and very very much obsessed with his work. And I saw him at a convention with he was sitting near Marina Sirtis and Aaron Douglas from Battlestar Galactica, and I was beyond excited to meet Aaron Douglas because Battlestar was still airing at the time. And I saw him, and he didn't have much of a line, and I think it was because Fringe was not yet a popular nerd show. And I remember kicking myself a year later when I finally started watching Fringe, and I was like, he was right there. I could have seen him. So I finally got to meet him in 2022 at Star Trek Las Vegas. And instead of having him sign a Prodigy thing, I had him sign my Fringe poster, which I've had most of the cast.
Most
of the cast has signed it. I think the only person I really need is Olivia, the woman who played her Anna Torv.
So I've got a funny Lord of the Rings story. Lord of the Rings is my second fandom behind Star Trek.
I love Lord of the Rings.
Loved the films. I watched the films before I ever got a hold of the books. And then the books were so much better for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting more than I ever knew possible from this. Just loved it. But, I proved my love for my wife because I skipped the last season of Deep Space Nine, recording it, that is. Of course, I went back and fixed that later. But
obviously.
But she proved her love for me when on our honeymoon, she let me take her to see the Two Towers on our honeymoon. So real romantic film,
I would totally want to go. I mean, so I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about fantasy, but we mentioned that Amazon picked up The Expanse. I'm a big fan of the new Rings of Power series.
Me too.
I'm so glad you like it, because a lot of people don't, and they have all these problems with elves being black and women having, Galadriel having a sword, and I think that stuff is rad.
No, that's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah.
So I am friendly with Bear McCreary, who does the music, and I have been very closely listening and watching and enjoying, and I absolutely love the scene in the first season. The song is called Scherzo for Violin and Swords.
Oh my goodness.
And it's a very cool, Galadriel is kind of in the training yard with some of these soldiers, and she's schooling all of them, which is great. And it's the violinist, what's her name? Bear's gonna hurt me. She does a wonderful job doing these like arpeggios and like the music is just absolutely stunning. And he also did I didn't even know there was such a thing as non-Western chords, but he employs them to make the stranger, who is Gandalf, essentially. It's not really a secret. Who is Gandalf, who lands in Middle Earth on this meteor, who is literally an alien in this world. And he ascribed these like chord progressions, and the music seems, very different and a bit foreign. And it's because it's not written in a traditional orchestra kind of a way. And I love hearing about like Sauron's theme and another character's theme that we won't say anything about, and how those two themes are like mirrors of each other, where he talks about how it's the same but inverted and backward.
Oh my goodness!
This sounds like Brian. Like
I'm
Brian,
nerding out on
Yeah,
hearing
this is Brian's
movie
wheelhouse.
soundtracks. I've never once thought about going. I love the music of the movies, which I think is spectacular. And Jerry Goldsmith is like my favorite Star Trek.
Well, Howard Shore did. Yeah, Howard Shore.
Yeah, Howard Shore. Yeah, I'm just saying. Jerry just bringing it back to Star Trek.
I love Star Trek music,
I never once considered finding the music to The Rings of Power. I'm going to immediately after we're done recording.
Well, do you know what else Bear did? The music to Battlestar Galactica was his first job.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
So he started out as a literal 24-year-old doing these like crazy, like not really before done drums, and like employing these different instruments, and not, he kind of veered away a little bit for the sound of Battlestar Galactica. He veered away from like the orchestral, like the big bombastic Star Wars and Star Trek. And I worked with Explore Mars, which is a NASA funded nonprofit, and the CEO of Explore Mars, Chris Carberry, did a book on space music, the music of space. Like, what does space sound like? Who are these people who have scored space? And of course, John Williams is like the foundation of it.
Right.
But he interviews Bear, and Bear says he was worried about setting. He's like, am I ruining science fiction film music by doing these different things and these big drums and these big, kind of more tribal sounds, and the way that, he kind of distinguished the Cylons, and the music is such a part of the plot towards the end, and all along the Watchtower. And I love that stuff. I'm like a production design nerd, and I am now a film music nerd due to a friend in college who was super into it. My friend Justin was extremely into it and got me into it. So I'd love to see. I've never been able to see Bear perform live, and I would love to see him do an orchestral like selection from his career, because he's also done Outlander and Walking Dead and like all these. He's like the king he does Foundation, that Adina and I were just mentioning. So he's like the reigning king of sci-fi sound. So I'm excited.
Well, the Cleveland Pops Orchestra does movie concerts at Blossom Music Venue. It's an outdoor venue, and they have done Lord of the Rings. They've done Star Wars, and they do Lord of the Rings every few years now. And I got to get there to see that, to see the orchestra, hear it live, and then see the film behind it.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's awesome that orchestras have really leaned into that and I think those performances really support and prop up and financially contribute to them doing their like traditional classical music.
Yeah, it gets people to go into and listen to classical music, because really, I mean, the Hollywood Bowl here in Los Angeles, they'll have retrospects and things like that.
Yeah, John Williams.
Yes, definitely. And down San Diego, they'll run they'll run New Hope, and they'll have live music for the entire soundtrack. And so it's really, my son-in-law is a tremendous Star Wars fan. He loves music. He's a very accomplished musician, and he just loves going to see live music for the soundtrack.
Yeah, I remember Gates McFadden had tweeted that her son was performing at Tanglewood, which is up here in Massachusetts. He's a violinist, and I go to Tanglewood. I did for a long time until the pandemic, every summer to see John Williams do film night at Tanglewood with the Boston Pops.
Oh my,
Nice.
that would have been
And you get
spent.
you sit on the lawn. It's like a big,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a picnic, and you hang
Mm-hmm.
out.
Mm-hmm.
And when the sun goes down, the music starts, and they do Indiana Jones and Harry Potter and
Yeah.
Star Wars and Jurassic Park, just everything. Like E.T. He always encores with E.T.
Yeah. For the
So,
LA for the Hollywood Bowl, there was a composer there, conductor John Melcheri, and he was doing a night of science fiction music. And after the halfway point, he came out in his full Star Trek uniform from Wrath of Khan, had the
oh
audience
wow.
just cheering, and it's like, okay, this is fun. This is where
Yeah,
fun
no, it's great. And
people
it's a
into it.
great way to like share it with
Mm-hmm.
um people of all ages and with your kids, and
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
Indiana Jones music playing. And I just that kind of thing
Yeah.
is very much a part of my like nerd identity. And
Mm-hmm.
I bought the vinyl for Rings of Power because I saw that it was out, and I'm like,
Oh, wow.
gotta get Bear to sign it now. That's like my goal, is to get him to sign that.
Wow.
And
Mm-hmm.
I have a photo, Battlestar Galactica. It's the Last Supper photo, if you're familiar with it, where
Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
I
Trisha
think
Helfer
I've
standing
seen
in the
that
middle.
one. Yes.
So it has been signed by almost all of the cast. I am only missing 3 people in Bear. Ron Moore has signed it. Several people who are not pictured have signed it, like Michelle Forbes and Candace McClure, and the woman who played Callie, like people who are in the show, just not in that picture.
Mm-hmm.
So the only people I have to meet are Jamie Bamber, Tamo Pennicott, and Michael Trucco, and they are all going to be in Chicago in October. So
Nice.
Wait, so does that mean you have met Katie Sackhoff?
yes, I have met her a couple times.
Oh, I would love to meet her.
She was
You just-
great. And this was
Yeah.
before any Star Wars, anything. She
Mhm.
was just
Well-
at New York Comic Con. I remember this
Yeah.
encounter very distinctly because it kind of speaks to like the misogyny that's in the convention space. I was holding my Last Supper photo. My husband was off doing something else, probably, magic or D&D related. And I'm standing in this line. I got there pretty early so I could be at the front of her line so I could make my other photo ops with Trisha Helfer, who was there. And this guy standing next to me sees my picture with all the signatures on it, and he goes, "Oh, so you're like a real fan, huh?" And I was like, "No, honey, I'm standing in this line for my health." And he was like, "Well, are you here with your husband or your boyfriend?" Or, I don't know if I was married at the time. And he was like, I was like, "No, he's here with me."
There you go.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's still a thing, man. It's still a thing.
So I remember, again, I remember when BSG, when that came out, I can't believe this, 20 years ago. But
I know,
Katie
it's hard
Sackhoff's
to think that.
character, I remember there was backlash against the fact that they had changed the character from a male to a female. But I'll tell you, her character is my favorite character in the show. Like, I loved her so much. And she was when we got introduced to Katie Sackhoff. I didn't know her, who she was before that, but I loved her so much
absolutely
in
love
that.
Starbuck,
loved her ever since.
but over the years, she has become my second favorite character to President Laura Roslin.
Oh, right. Oh my God. Yes.
I love Mary McDonnell. I was so excited to see how great she was in the fall of the House of Usher last year. I've met her several times. I have a piece of the Galactica that is on my wall that when they auctioned it off.
Oh,
The only people I wanted to sign it were Edward James Olmos, Mary McDonnell, and Michael Hogan, and they have all signed it. And unfortunately, Michael Hogan had a stroke, and he is not doing appearances any longer. So, and Richard Hatch has passed away, and Richard Hatch did sign my picture. So,
wow. Nice. But yeah. Oh, gosh. Now, okay. And now I'm really excited to do a rewatch of BSG, and I'm gonna make my son do it with me. We're doing it.
It's an emotional,
time.
It's a very emotional, suffering, but it's excellent.
We sometimes, Amy, do, and we haven't done it in a while. Maybe it's just I only do it. I don't remember if you guys ever implement it, but I'm going to have a confession time here.
I did it once.
Confession.
I have not watched second of Battlestar Galactica, and it has been on my list for years. I have access to it. I just
raise up on the list.
I need to do the treadmill thing. I need to.
Yeah.
I need to do the treadmill thing, Adina, where I just get on the treadmill, watch an episode at a time, and plug.
I don't know if that's a treadmill show. That you're going to be sobbing while you're on your treadmill.
It's all right. I'm a crier, anyways. I'm used to
treadmill
it.
show. The whole idea of the treadmill show is it's a show that you're not allowed to watch unless you're on the treadmill. And the idea is it's it's meant to be a show that is just gripping. So you want to be on the treadmill in order to watch the show.
Right.
Okay,
That's
so
the
yes,
time
it
go
is
by.
that.
Yeah.
It is that.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
So speaking of Space Force, what I want to know more about Space Force, Amy, and what you're doing with that, if that's okay.
Sure. So I my contract with them was finished after the event, but I do hope to work with some of them in the future. I was on the planning committee for their first their inaugural conference, which was called Space Power. That was in December in Orlando. So I worked on that for, from September onward last year.
Wow.
And I was the speaker wrangler. So I had about 85 speakers that we had over the course of 3 days. So I got to basically tell the 4-star generals, like, all right, we're walking backstage. You got to get your mic on. You got to do this. You got to do that.
Fantastic.
I was the stage manager.
You outranked them. There you go.
And it was great because I wore a different Star Trek badge every day. So shout out to Fan Sets for supplying my wardrobe of Star Trek badges. And every single person I think I encountered commented on it. And I had Joe on their phone. You're me dressed like Captain Picard. I'm so proud of you. And I also got to meet some cool private aerospace folks. Jared Isaacman from Polaris Dawn was one of our speakers. Astronaut Scott Poteet, who's going to be on their mission next month, which is hopefully launching next month. They're going to do the first commercial spacewalk. And it's funny because Jared and I are from the same tiny little place near Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Oh, but darn.
So we had a little Lehigh Valley native conversation, and he's still based there. He's married and has 2 kids, and they're still based there. But he flies in and out. He flies his own plane. He usually flies to his own appearances. So he's been training with the Air Force and Space Force, and really, really walking the walk in terms of becoming an astronaut. And working with the Space Force and hearing all of their presentations on what we're doing, all of the different kinds of satellite technology that's in orbit. There's so many things that are happening in aerospace that I think people are just completely unaware of. And most people don't even know that we're going back to the moon with the Artemis missions. And we're going to finally put a woman on the moon and maybe a person of color. That would be great because only white men have been to the moon.
That's so incredible.
And we haven't been back to the moon in 50 years. This is like 50 years this year.
That's right.
No, it's more than 50 years. It's like 52 years.
Is it?
Yep, 72. 1972 was the last time.
52. So I guess that statistic was correct when I was doing it. started talking about it more often.
Well, the reason why I kind of know that is I remember that moment when I was somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. I guess I don't remember exactly when it was, but when I learned that we hadn't been to the moon in my lifetime. Because when I was somewhere like 6, 7, I thought I was going to, grow up and have my own company, and we were going to build robots, and we'd be located on the moon. Because I thought people went to the moon every day in the space shuttle, which had just started in, 1980, 81 timeframe. And then again, some adult clued me in to the reality of the situation. And now here, we are. And hopefully, again, hopefully my career will encompass some part of getting
there's some I have actually really funny. I have a card sitting here on my desk from Lunar Outpost. They're doing robotics to land different vehicles on the moon. And one of the biggest problems with the moon, and if you watch For All Mankind, they don't really address it that often. They maybe mention it in passing, which is the moon dust, the regolith on the surface is very bad for electronics. And it gets on everything, it gets in everything, and we're trying to find ways to mitigate that and keep the robots operational. They've done that with greater success on Mars, I think, because the material that the ground is made out of is more rocky. Right. It's more like little rocks versus like dust.
Yeah, the moon is more like glass, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like it's subject to a lot of static, it's like how stuff attracts static. So this is so I've been involved in some work to research some of this at my own company too. So
awesome. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think, one of my favorite things to say about Star Trek and the space program and NASA is that Star Trek is smart people coming together to solve big problems.
Very good.
I love the fact that we have these scientific problems that are facing us, but they seem like, in my opinion, they seem solvable. We have to find the way. It's like what is it, in Apollo 13 when they dump everything on the desk and they're like, all right, this is what they have, let's figure it out. And there's moments like that in For All Mankind when they're like, what was that, Margot Madison, my girl, she says, let's work the problem. Like, you have to work the problem. And that's what inspires me, because, as a little kid, I was always building Legos and like, making my bat cave out of like cardboard boxes and buttons. And, that kind of stuff was very inspiring to me. And I see these people now who are working to solve these big problems, like Adina, and other people in aerospace. And I think, this is where we need to be putting our time and attention. And that's why I want my career to be in this field.
Nice.
That's great. That's great.
You guys had a fantastic panel at Trek Long Island too, just the two of you. It was I was really glad I chose to sit in on that.
Thank you. I'm so glad you came.
Yeah, here you guys talk about all that stuff was really inspiring. And as a dad who has a daughter who is very interested in science, I'm starting to learn. She is saying things like, I think science is my favorite.
That's great.
And so I want her.
How old is she?
She is 10 years old, just turned 10.
Oh, perfect.
And so she's just so curious and interested, and I want her to go for it. So to Amy, hear your story and hear you talk about everything you're involved in. And of course, Adina, she got to meet you in person at our, for the Eclipse thing, but
great.
You guys are just really important for me from a dad's perspective, for my daughter to see that she can do it too, that if she works hard and is willing to put up with some crap and push through that.
There is some crap, unfortunately.
She's got a mom who works in the Forest Service, which is a good old boy thing.
Yes, it is.
She's endured. It's incredible what she has had to push through to get where she's at. And so women like you are helping kids like my daughter be inspired to go for it.
I hope so. And I really appreciate you saying that, because some days it feels daunting. And
sure,
I also think, like, because I don't have a science degree, because I have my master's in lit, God forbid, and I don't have a degree in, even just medicine, any real STEM field. People think that you can't work in aerospace. And I have to say, it's a challenge. I'm looking for my next job right now. I am able to do things kind of piecemeal for people, but they have not really, and I said this on the panel, is that they don't really have a ton of marketing and communications in space. But part of what they are going to need to be competitive in the market is someone telling their story.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I'm when I'm out there speaking, especially when I speak to high school students, is I let them know that whatever they're interested in, there is an overlay between that and the space industry. It could be, of course, science, engineering, any kind of science engineering field, whether it's more civil engineering, more mechanical engineering, more computer science. Those are obvious. But then all the other things, because there are artists. Look at all the art that NASA and ESA produces. And again, look at all the writing that they produce. There, I had a kid at one of the events that we did who was interested in fashion. And so I was like, well, textiles and materials and how that's put together for form, fit, and function as we spending more time in space and on the other, surface of the moon, hopefully the surface of Mars. That's an important aspect too, and his mind just was like, whoa, people don't think about these things, but no matter what you're interested in, you're interested in food. It's going to be very important what people eat.
It's so necessary. Like, if you talk to an astronaut, they complain about two things: the bathroom and the food.
That's right.
It's the food is, we have to figure out a way to create protein rich food that's tasty and that's able to survive in these environments without hopefully eventually we'll have refrigeration, but it's very difficult. And I also say, we're going to need, I actually, I think it was so I work for a company called Above Space. I do their social media. They just launched a payload to the ISS to test their materials. There's this, basically, it's think about fabric swatches, but in a big metal holding, and each swatch is exposed to the elements of space. So they're testing materials to see how the materials react to the cold, the radiation, the vacuum. So they're testing for materials to make their, Prometheus platform and other things, make the materials to see how they'll react when they can finally launch them, and see, how fast will they degrade when they're in orbit, how will they react to being so cold all the time. And Rhonda, the CEO, she's one of the few women who's a CEO in aerospace, Rhonda Stevenson. And she had recently met someone who, I think she sews the spacesuits together.
Oh, wow.
And that was like her first job. And then she wrote a children's book too, which I can look into it and send it and text message it to you afterwards. You can post it in the comments. But I mean, we need all kinds of, like you said, the thing with the textiles. And if you ever gone to a NASA booth at a con, I know they have a presence at the DC, the Awesome Con, and they let you like put your hands in the gloves and then try to use the gloves to like unscrew a lid. Do a very simple task, like unscrewing a lid or like buttoning something like you have to do, or using a wrench. And it's very difficult because your fingers you're not nimble. They're encased in, protection from the elements of space. And we're going to figure it all out. But
It takes smart people, time and money.
Time and money, yeah.
Mostly money.
Mostly money. But
money and time. Time is very important too.
Well, that's why space has to be. That's why space is currently like a billionaire's game, which is what I mean. I don't love that. Nobody loves that. But if these people are interested in putting money towards space, then we should take advantage of that.
And they're employing a lot of people. The nice thing, the good thing about the billionaires being interested in space is the amount of people they're employing and the amount of work that's getting done, which is a lot.
Yeah, which is funny because, certain CEOs want to put 200 people on Mars and then want to have a Mars generation. Well, where are you getting all those wombs from to have babies?
Yep.
Yeah. You're going to need some women. You're going to need to have the women in your space program and you're going to need to create positive environments for these women to work in, and they are not there yet.
Yeah.
So, we are.
And even as a society, we're not there yet because we're so far from even knowing how safe it could possibly be to do pregnancy and things on a different planet and in space. So there's a great book, The Case for Mars, by the Wiener Smiths out there. I love that book so much because it is, as much as I am pro everything, let's get out there into space, let's get onto the moon, let's go on to Mars. I like their take on dialing back to a little realism and just kind of reminding us of all the challenges that we still have to overcome. So no matter how much people want to do things, there's still a lot of steps that have to happen. There's still a lot of technology that needs to be developed. There's still a lot to do.
Well, one of the funniest, and this I because of working with Above Space, they talk about this, is that we don't have a space travel problem. We have a gravity problem. We need artificial, the human body needs gravity. Like putting people in space for a long duration and the effects of zero G on the human body are untenable. It's like your eyes get weird and smushed and your fluids don't circulate properly and your spine can compress, like all of these things that can happen to the human body because we are designed to be living in Earth's gravity. And the funniest part of all sci-fi is when a person steps from a spaceship onto another spaceship or when they say we turn the gravity on and off. Like that's not a film.
No. Scott Kelly's book Endeavor, his year in a that was just a great book, and just reading about what he had to go through, not only physically but mentally, to accomplish that. It's really quite amazing. And then when he finally returned back to Earth, and just how he was in total agony for so many days afterwards as his body acclimated back to gravity. Yes, that's the biggest problem.
One of the amazing things is there's so much still we don't know, because we know about living and working in 1G here on Earth. Yeah. We know a lot about 0G, not everything, but we know a lot. But then we really don't know anything about the levels of gravity that we experience on Mars or on the moon. So the few days that people were on the moon, not even close to enough data at
Yeah.
all. We
Yeah.
basically know not. We basically might as well have not have been there at all for the amount of knowledge that we have on how that that level of gravity affects us. So much we don't know. There's so much room to explore.
Well, something that you just said, Steve, about Scott Kelly talking about his mental state, something that I have talked about before is the importance of seeing Counselor Troy on the bridge on The Next Generation.
Yeah.
Because mental health is extremely important. And I know that, as a generation, we're like, as an elder millennial, I am, kind of the first in my family, like my nuclear family, to really invest in therapy and see, what generational trauma is, and see kind of, the negative things that I was raised with by being raised Catholic. Just the kind of effects that has had on, my perception of, society and where my messaging about gender roles came from. And seeing Counselor Troy sitting next to Captain Picard, I've seen like funny jokes about it where it's like the species on the other side of the view screen has to know that this man has no chill, because the ship's counselor has to be right next to him in order to prevent. And Picard is known for being very level-headed and diplomatic. Right. And I think, I feel like there's a connection there between the fact that, he has a mental health professional sitting right, literally next to him on the bridge. And
he listened to her too.
And he listened to her.
He gave her space to talk and to express herself. And even if he didn't like what she said all the time, he listened and considered her opinion.
Yeah, and I saw Patrick Stewart, and it's so funny. I feel like I'm saying this again because I said it with Adina. I saw Patrick Stewart.
It's important. It's important.
It is important. It's very important. So I saw Whoopi Goldberg interviewing Sir Patrick when his book was released in like October-ish in New York. And he said that, and I tweeted about this and got a lot of angry male nerds. He said that right after The Next Generation finished, he said he didn't say who, he said a kind person in my life told me that I needed to go to therapy. And he said, I went to therapy for the next 25 years and it was the best thing I've done for myself. And I was like, see that, toxic nerd man? Captain Picard says go to therapy. But it's just funny because men are still very resistant to it.
Yeah.
But not just men, everybody seems a little resistant in different periods of their lives. But I feel like, the boomer generation, very resistant to it. And being able to kind of have that positive example, looking for these female role models in my life, teachers and Captain Janeway and Scully and, all of these cool women that I'm seeing. It's like, you need to have a certain level of like mental fortitude and like to get to that level of leadership and to get to, we didn't really see Janeway talking out her problems as much as maybe I would have liked.
Well,
as an adult looking back,
the franchise did a disservice.
She went to like holodeck programs and like stuff like that.
But I think, having Counselor Troy there was amazing. And I think the franchise did a disservice to not continue bringing that forward and not like continuing to have that kind of a role at the forefront going forward. I think that was a missed opportunity.
Well, we have Culber now, who's doing.
But the thing is, he's doing dual duty.
He's doing
like
both.
I feel like that's not fair.
And then wasn't
and it's not fair.
Esri Dax.
Admiral Cornwell was also like in there. Wasn't she also a therapist?
Yeah, that's true. And right, Esri Dax. So there was a little bit of bringing that back, but I think they really could have. They had an opportunity. It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I would also like to see a man in that role, as a ship's counselor, and I think that. Always casting the woman as the person who's taking care of the crew's mental health is not the greatest trend. And when people talk about the, feminist agency in The Next Generation and Dr. Crusher being the Federation flagship chief medical officer and how important that is, and also being a mom, one of the few moms we see in Star Trek. And those are caregiving roles. Like they are like those two women on the ship are caregiving for the rest of the male crew, which I totally see that point of view. And it's very, very valid. But I also think that seeing them as professional women at the top of their field to the point where they are stationed on the Federation flagship is important.
It's definitely. I remember when then Deep Space Nine came out. I was in my first year of college when Deep Space Nine came out. And I remember recognizing and noticing that, oh my God, they have two amazing female characters that are not in the caregiver roles. I remember back then making that connection that was amazing, because as much as I like Crusher and Troy, yes, it's like, okay, where are the women scientists? Where are the women engineers? They weren't there yet. And then all of a sudden, okay, now we have Jadzia, who is this amazing scientist. And I remember all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I
but
remember that too.
The other thing I did always appreciate about Crusher is that she was a working mom.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah.
And I know that's a big part of your journey, Adina, and I enjoyed getting to know you and hearing about your opinions on that, because I too hope to be a working mom someday.
Very good.
So
yeah. And my wife, of course, too, is full-time, works from home for the Forest Service. But anyways, amazing stuff. Amy, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of plug what you're doing currently. Maybe if you got something coming up, and where can people find you? Of course, we'll put stuff in our podcast notes too, so people have easy access to just click away and find you. But is there anything in particular you'd like to plug?
Let's see. Well, I think by the time this episode airs, that BayCon will probably have happened already. I am going to be in the Bay Area the first week of July to run the Women in STEM track there. And I'm sure it's not just women. We want it to be diverse voices in STEM. So, non-binary folks and all identities welcome. That was the original pitch, was a Women in STEM track, because they want to uplift those voices. So I have a couple really cool panels that are coming up there. Hopefully we'll tape them and they can be accessible if I upload them to YouTube or upload the audio. I will be attending the Ascend Space Conference, which is actually the same week and the same place as Star Trek Las Vegas. So
Two
if
for
you're going
one.
to Star Trek Las Vegas, Ascend is at Caesar's Palace on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the week of the convention. So that's the 29th, 30th, and 31st. And then you could just go right over back to the Rio and hang out and go to Star Trek Las Vegas, because I'll be there too. So hopefully going to be working with a couple organizations there, and just I hosted a party last year, I called it the STEM Stars Party. It was, kind of a focus on women in STEM, so we could all kind of get together and network and have a drink. And so maybe we'll try to do something like that if I get the right sponsors and folks lined up for that. We'll see. But mostly you can find me online at Amy Imhoff 1701 on pretty much every platform: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, although I don't post my own videos on TikTok very often. I mostly just use TikTok to watch other videos, like Taylor Swift, which we did not talk about. But, my Lord and Savior, Taylor Swift. Yeah, another beacon of emotion, of feeling your emotions and championing women's interior lives. So that's my hooray for Taylor moment. And what else am I up to this year? I don't know if I'll be going to that Battlestar Galactica convention at the end of October in Chicago, but I'm kind of aiming for it now. So we'll see.
All right.
Okay. Very good.
Cool. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being on our show and sharing your story and experiences with us and our listeners. We'll have some links, like I said, for you to learn more about Amy and all of the wonderful things she's a part of. Guys, we need more people in the STEM space. Maybe today's discussion has inspired you to go for it, make your mark, just like Amy's doing, and Adina too, of course. Thanks
and
for
even
listening.
Your daughter.
And yes, and soon my daughter. So thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and most importantly, to rate our podcast and write a glowing review. That will really help us get this podcast in front of more potential listeners. Also, thanks to the amazing Bill and Dan at Trek Geeks for having us as a part of their network. We sure appreciate you guys and being a part of that wonderful collective of awesome podcasts. And until next time, treat everyone you meet with respect all the time. Hey guys, this is Brian from the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, and I'm at Trek Long Island 2024, having a really great time hanging out in the vendor room. And I'm meeting all kinds of new people, making new friends. And one of my new friends is Rich, and he is representing Spawn Point Coffee. There is some fantastic product at his table here. And he's going to talk a little bit about you and tell you where you can get this very unique and delicious smelling. I'll tell you that. It smells amazing, Rich. Coffee. Here's Rich.
Thank you so much. So just a little bit about the product. We do carry a variety of different things. We have our decaf line for those people who love decaf. And I know I'm not a huge fan, but after 2 years, we finally rolled it out. So that wanted to be the first announcement I make for all you people who ask me every time, where's the decaf? It's officially out. We carry 2 different types of espresso. We have an Espresso Supremo, which is fantastic. All depends on what you like doing and how you prepare it. You can get it whole bean or ground. For those who are looking for something a little bit more eclectic, you can get a single origins. We have several different variety types, including Colombian and a Kenya AA. We do have some blends available in your traditional types of coffee style. And our biggest sellers are always going to be the flavors. So right now, the 2 biggest popular ones are going to be S'mores Seduction, and then we have the Cinnamon Hazelnut. And for those game lovers, this is all video game themed coffee. So we have our first person shooter, Chocolate Cake Comfort. We do have our RPG grinders, which is going to be your single origin Colombian. Everything has a finite story behind it, just to kind of get a little bit into the background of where I started with the whole video game and genre. So just to date myself on age, I did start with the Atari 2600 and work myself all the way. I know, right? Everyone's like,
many of us did over 40.
So that's kind of where everything started for me. I've always loved video games, kind of worked my way up all the consoles and systems, and I love when people come up and say, oh my God, have you got to go to a retro arcade? And I'm like, well, for me, that was just an arcade. And then how do we get into coffee? Well, that's a very long, in-depth story, which we don't have time for right now. But I would like to say that anyone who is definitely a coffee fiend, coffee lover, just looking for something new and exciting, if you do go to spawnpointcoffee.com, we have specialty coffee there, and everything is roasted on demand. So what that means to you, we want to give you the best experience possible. If you order online, everything is roasted within 24 to 48 hours and shipped directly to you, which is great because we want you to get the best experience possible for the coffee that we do offer. We do have a free rewards program you could sign up to. We offer a number of different things that you can do with your points on there. If you're looking for the long-term love of your life, which I'm sure you can find here, especially with the Amaretto we have, for the love of the game, Amaretto. You can do a monthly subscription that we have discounted. You can pause, stop your membership, cancel it, change it, whatever you'd like. So we do offer a variety of things. And if you are unable to find us on our website, you can go to Amazon and go find us there, as well as Walmart Marketplace.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate you, brother. Good luck to you the rest of the weekend here at Trek Long Island. Don't forget, check that out, Spawn Point Coffee. I need coffee right now. All right. Thank you, guys. Have fun.